look like, as Varun A said, I'm going to call them A and D when I'm going to ask them questions. As Varun A said, that we look like people who can actually audition for Patal Lok 2 if it ever comes out. So, yep, we are there. Patal Lok, Anushka Sharma, if you're listening. But so here we go, right? Varun A and Varun D. The whole conversation that I want to actually have with the two of you is that you guys represent something which is, it's an exotic breed, and the reason why it's an exotic breed is because it is all about corporate guys kind of becoming entrepreneurs and then succeeding at it. So that is like highly inspirational for all of us. I mean, for those who don't know, Varun D is somebody who has been the co-founder of the Glitch for, I think, over 9 years now.
Yeah, we just finished 10 actually in December.
10
so
years,
we
yeah.
10 years now,
yeah, 10 years, wonderful. And that, hats off to you. The fact is that you've been doing that, but you were in MTV and as well as Channel V before.
Yeah.
So those were shorter stints, but I think that you've done this wonderful thing with the Glitch, which you call a new age marketing agency, and we'll get somewhere close to asking you questions about that. But Varun A has been a true blue corporate man. I mean, you've worked with Unilever, Hindustan Lever, Diageo, Coca-Cola in brand management roles, and then shifted over to your own Honasa. Is that the way in which you?
Yes,
what would
that's
be
the name of the company. Yeah.
And Mamaearth is the
name of the brand.
Is what you sell. Is what you're marketing, right? Okay. Yes. And you call yourself Chief Dad. That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, whoa, okay. Okay, all right. So here you are, the two of you, and this is the topic at hand. So here's the right, and I just look to make this into a slightly different webinar, which is about we don't like to give corporate spiel over here, right? And I'm sure you guys will appreciate it better than anybody else. So we don't give corporate spiel. So if your brands come up in the course of the conversation, excellent. Otherwise, I just want to focus on how you think and what makes you tick, and just try to understand as much as you guys do. So let me start off with this question. Do you think it has been worth it? So who wants to go first, A or D, and why?
Absolutely. I think this has been the most phenomenal and enriching stint I've had. And I'm so happy I took that plunge and took that decision, which was a very difficult decision to take at that point of time. We had a 1.5-year-old kid and parents as well who were supposed to move in with us, and we were taking that decision at this point of time, and we were taking a decision where both of us were going to get involved with the startup. So it wasn't like there was a safety net where one person will keep working and sort of bringing in the bread, and the other person will sort of take the risks. And we're like, hey, let's like go all in and throw everything at it, and all from a family perspective also. So, but I haven't regretted that decision even a single minute of these 3.5 years that
why is that?
I think it is so challenging, right? From all perspectives, every day there is something new that you're looking forward to, and there is nothing that bores you at this job, right? There is so much to create, and which is, I think, almost all entrepreneurs really thrive on creation for sure. And of course, farming is also a very important part of the role, but creation is something that all entrepreneurs thrive on, and that happens every day. And I mean, the amount of independence that you have in terms of executing your ideas, the thrill that you get by actually building something from 0 to 1 to 10 to 100, the thrill that you get by you're pitching all the time now. If you're someone who loves that, then that's also a thrill in itself, because each time you're able to convert, then that's a thrill. And I'm talking about pitching to consumers. So each time you're able to get someone to buy. I'm
Yeah.
talking about pitching to vendors. Each
Yeah.
time you're able to get someone to partner on better terms than others. Pitching to investors, pitching to employees, right, to join your vision and sort of be a part of this journey. And
Yeah.
I think it's an absolutely exciting place to be.
Yeah. And now let me ask Varun D. So A and D. So yeah.
So we actually took this decision to start Glitch at a very weird time, right? It was the year after recession.
Okay.
Me and Rohit honestly did not have as much experience. So I'd spent about 4 to 6 months in. So I'd done a 3 month internship at MTV, gone back there and done another 4 or 5 months doing a show for them. In a very random scenario, quit and moved to Channel V. And I spent about close to 3 years there. So it wasn't like I had large amount of experience. And luckily for us, Channel V was this very like indie studio within what was a corporate giant show star at that point of time.
Yeah.
And we honestly, I'll tell you what, we spent 6 months thinking of the name. We spent 1 month thinking about what we would actually do. So that was literally how we started Glitch off, is because we couldn't come up with the name. And our first name was going to be called J Viru and Company, because we had that photograph on that bike. Thank God we did not go for that. But yes, I think for us, what's been interesting and why I think it's exciting is every year, if I look at the last 10 years, my role has changed and our business has taken certain different directions every year, right? So I never felt like I'm doing the same job. So there's no form of stagnation with this.
Yeah.
And I've done everything from look at operations and look at finance, which is the worst part. I think the worst period of my thing was when looking at finance. Thank God I don't do too much of that anymore. And I look at the creation part. I mean, the early days, like Rohit would direct and I would edit. And we would figure ways to do it. I think that's been interesting, right? And what's also been good is, I mean, we got acquired 2 years ago. So we're technically not fully owned by us, right? But I think
you've done the whole thing, actually.
Yeah, yes, we got acquired 2 years ago. We're a part of WPP, and we work with them now across multiple projects, not just at Glitch, but across the network, work with everybody else. And that's also been an interesting transition. I think that's the point where we were all a little concerned. Okay, how much will things change? And obviously there are changes, right? Back end, finance, all that stuff has a lot of changes that kind of come in. But we've still been excited about what we can really do, and as long as we have that level of ownership, we've enjoyed it. So for me, it's ownership and how much can you actually do. The one thing which we didn't want to do, which is why I think we quit our jobs at that point in time as well, is that we didn't feel like we want to go through that same cycle. Like I used to do one show, directing and producing it, then move to the next show and the next show. That felt stagnating. This felt like you can wake up one morning and the sky can fall on your head, right? But you have to figure a way to get out of it. So that's what
that was I think chief vital statistics, right? You're quoting. I think that's useless knowledge, but Varun D. Okay, but that's a very interesting answer. What I'm getting from us, which I'm trying to encapsulate, because from your body language and the way in which you're explaining, I think there's a certain different kind of energy that you connect to as an entrepreneur, which you cannot connect to as a corporate guy, right? Is something that I'm kind of seeing in the two of you, as which is like the hidden part of your answer. But if somebody, like, I'm sure you have a lot of people who come up to you and say, sir, should I start, should I not start, this, that, and the other, when is it right for somebody to kind of jump the ship and do it? Because you said you had a kid, and he said he was at the very beginning of life or something like that. So it's always a difficult decision. What factors? Let's start with A again. What factors would you say? How would you go about the thinking process? Okay, so this is when I do the startup.
I think from a sample set, I can easily say that it can be done at any point of time. Right? I don't think there is a clear answer to this. Right? That said, I would absolutely not undermine the experience I've gotten, with the corporates that I've worked. And those were absolutely crucial and amazing years in terms of shaping who I am and what kind of a leader I'll become. And I mean, even today, when our investors look at the kind of processes, the kind of culture that we are building at the company, and they're actually very impressed. And when they compare with other startups, they find that to be significantly more better and more advanced in terms of some of those things. And I dedicate all of that to what I have learned at some of these companies, right? Because you get a holistic exposure when you're working, right? So each and every year of the experience that I've got has been very valuable.
So let me ask you this question then: what made you switch? Because you were obviously doing well, and how did you do it?
So I think in our case, and this is, by the way, the 13th folder which I have in this big folder called business ideas, right, on my laptop, right? So I don't want anyone to sort of take away कि यार ये overnight मेरे को ऐसा लगा कि मुझे जो है धंधा करना चाहिए, and I sort of resigned and I said ये कल से नौकरी में नहीं होगा, right? So that wasn't the case, right? Since college, for that matter, and if you look at my family background, I'm probably the only guy who has done post graduation. Forget about corporate, right? Everyone else has been largely an SME businessman, doing their own pieces. So I'd seen business from my childhood, right? So even after post graduation, once I joined corporate, right, I was always excited by the idea of starting something of my own, and having something that I can call my own, creating, leaving my own legacy, creating a business which creates a mark, right? By actually driving a certain valuable change which we intend to. So and like I said, there were multiple times when different kind of ideas. So there were multiple times when different.
So then, what made you jump the ship?
So coming to that, right? I'm just building up, right?
Sorry. Take your time. You got a meeting.
So there were times where the ideas that I was thinking about needed a certain skill for which I had to. So for example, if it was an app-based idea, right? I realized कि यार ये मतलब मेरे को coding तो जरा सी भी नहीं आती है, right? I'll need a very good CTO as a co-founder to sort of run this, right? And I sort of kept waiting that if I come across, I visited a lot of these startup events as well, where you meet right kind of people, and but then wasn't really able to sort of, I don't think that happens randomly. Usually either you're together and then you find an idea and things work out, right? So it for one reason or the other, it just didn't materialize into a full-fledged commitment, right? For which you were willing to put everything online, right? In this case, I think this whole journey started for us with our own baby that happened in 2014, and we as parents started seeing this space very closely when we were making our own decisions, and hence the purpose was very strong, right? That this is actually something that we wanted to solve for. And the second thing that was very strong was the feeling that यार मतलब 10 साल से यही कर रहा हूँ, ये तो कर सकता हूँ, right? इसके लिए I don't think between the two of us we have enough knowledge and strength that we can at least take a dive. Right? The third thing that I that sort of I thought about a lot was around the fact that it was a stage in my career where I still had a lot of good years, and even if I would have given 3 years to this and failed, I would have still been 34 and largely employable basis the experiences that I had. So I had that chat, by the way, with a lot of good consultants, HR consultants, right, to understand कि यार क्या value होती है मतलब एक failed entrepreneur की, right, after 3 odd years, right? Can you at least join at the same level that you were, right? Forget about aage badhna badna, right? Because what drove me the most was I did not want to live with regret. I was okay living with failure, right? But living with regret was not a possibility because you can't turn back time, right? You're 50, you're now feeling कि यार तूने किया ही नहीं, ट्राई नहीं किया, ये साले 20 फोल्डर ही बन के रह गए जो मतलब बिजनेस आइडिया के नाम से, राइट? अभी क्या करेगा इसका? तो मतलब that was not the place I wanted to be in, right? I wanted to try, right? Fail, कुछ नहीं होता, worst case बैच के पीछे हो जाऊंगा, मतलब कुछ नहीं होता यार, उससे क्या फर्क पड़ेगा?
What's really interesting, thanks. What's really interesting is that you kind of combined your rational mind and your emotional mind. So your emotional mind was actually giving you your purpose, right? And your rational mind was like, okay, is it like really a risk? Or can I manage it? So it's very interesting. Yeah.
Did both of them. I wouldn't lie. There was too much at stake here. Right? So for me, I mean, even my parents were asking, भाई मतलब तुम्हारा lifestyle ऐसा है, 2 foreign vacation लेते हो, ये सब करते हो. How will you manage all this? Right? Are you expecting us to support you now again? And those conversations did happen. Right? So I had to sort of fall back on rational, pieces as well.
No, this is very Varun A. This is really, really useful for every budding entrepreneur listening out here, right? And now I'll shift to my focus to Varun D. So what do you think? It must be a completely different story or similar.
So what he said about structures that larger conglomerates have, right? I've actually had the flip journey where I didn't have as much structure because in your early years you don't necessarily have as much structure. Even the companies you work for are really large, right?
Correct.
But for me, the last 2 years, especially after now, so for me it's flip. Right? Started off entrepreneur, now part of what is considered a large structured. I mean, the words you hear before you get acquired is okay. It's going to be bureaucratic. It's going to be processes. It's going to be all of that. But the more we've actually been through this process, we realize that as you become larger, those are things you need to build anyway, right? You need to have systems, you need to have processes, like stuff like there's compliance, which has become one of those things which we all say a lot more than I didn't even know what that word was till 3 years ago, right? Which is basically to make sure that because it's so large, we have to figure out if from a technology standpoint, from a legal standpoint, and all those things you would end up like earlier you would sign a contract saying, okay, how much time will someone take to pay us? Is the scope of what we have to deliver fine? चलो बाकी सब तो normal होता है, sign कर लेते हैं. Now you run through that contract. Right? I feel like I'm quarter lawyer because I've read so many contracts in the last 10 years on every project.
How does that make you feel? By the way, just
I enjoy it. So even now, for instance, it's very weird that even though we have a legal counsel, most times I get that copy because someone wants me to can you just cross check because you find clauses.
How can you enjoy this? Seriously, how?
So it takes a couple of years to so if you as an agency if you want to get acquired, it takes you about a couple of years where you go through something called due diligence where you run through numbers and through contracts. So I did about 2 years of that and after that now I know how to look at any contract properly. And I know which and the trick is, and I tell a lot of our guys, right, is that if you give it to a lawyer look at it from a legal standpoint. You need to look at it from how do you safeguard your own business, right? Sometimes you might sign something which might not make sense for what you do, but from a legal standpoint might be fine. And I know there are certain sets, at least in our business, which you need to always keep in mind. So I focus on those.
But if you knew all of this now, before you started, if you knew all of this shit, okay, would you have still started your startup?
So we honestly didn't know what we were starting. I'll be honest. How Glitch came to be was the fact that Channel V said they're not going to play music anymore. And we enjoyed working with music and with artists. They were going to go the youth GEC route. And we said, where is the fun stuff happening? And someone said, digital is where it will happen. And we were anyway consumers of it, right? We were like me and Rohit were people who were living our lives, so much stuff online at that point of time. And she said, okay, you can direct, I can produce because I've done large scale, TV properties, reality TV and all that stuff. I said, we'll figure it out. So we just quit. And everybody told us it's a mistake, hence the name Glitch. Because everybody told us it's a mistake.
I thought there was some high funda glitch in the Matrix. You were, liking the Matrix as a movie.
We thought about multiple names. Suddenly, some conversation, the word glitch was uttered. And both of us looked at each other and like, this sounds right. And
My God. Okay.
It just kind of sticks.
tell you the truth, I was like really attributing a lot of intellectual properties to that name so far. I was like, the
Everybody
glitch,
tells me
that
it's
is
a
when the
mistake.
deja vu scene happens in the Matrix and shit like that.
Oh,
And
no.
that's when, so they stand for the disruption, because I read through your website, no disruption, this, that,
So
and the other.
that you write afterwards. What you come up with a name you like,
Yes,
then you come up with the theory of all these things
you
after
know
that.
that is so true, because a lot of name you have to like the damn name.
Yeah.
I think it's very
Yeah.
cool. It's a very underrated
And it's
one.
also sometimes it's some of those choices you make, right? When we started off, we didn't have a CEO till Pooja became our CEO,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because we said it will be very weird for two people to start it, especially a service company, and say that one is CEO, one is CCO, because हमारे बाकी कौन है वहाँ पर? So we said, okay, let's have fun with it. So I was called left brain, Rohit was called right brain.
nice.
And that also became an interesting thought starter. And we would do stuff like, okay, 1 second, Rohit would go to the meeting and say that, okay, he pitches the creative idea, and then when they start talking money, he'd say, no, I will tell, the operations side to get in touch. And I'm in the car downstairs, right? It wasn't like I was. And so I would go up about a couple of hours later as if I've driven there. And I say, I get finance to send you the invoice. I'm making the invoice on my own laptop. So we've done all those things, right? So I think that's really, I mean, that initial, that's the one thing which I sometimes miss, that initial hustle of you doing so many things as you become larger and
Yeah.
you start giving that off. It's great
Yeah.
because you can give it off, but sometimes you do miss it as well, doing the actual work.
Actually,
So I think,
yeah.
yeah.
No,
I have a really nice anecdote
please.
that same piece. So early on, it was just me and Ghazal for almost. So we quit in July. We started working on the brand. We launched in December,
Yeah.
and 5th January is when we hired our first employee.
Right.
So after launching, after about 30 days, and then second was in March end or something, right? So
Right.
customer care for about 6 months, it was just me and Ghazal who used to manage customer care. So one day, one of our now investors actually called on the customer care and to say, hey, we are looking for to connect with you. We're calling from so and so's family office, right? And we are looking to connect with Varun because we want to have a potential investment conversation. And I'm on the line, right? So, but of course, you don't want to tell कि आप customer service इतनी छोटी company कि customer service भी आप खुद संभाल रहे हो, right? So I was like, yeah, just hold on, and let me check with his assistant if he's available or not. And I hold it after about 30 seconds. Say hi, yeah, please share a number. We will forward it. And then,
God, that was like Karthik calling Karthik, yeah.
And that's something which a lot of people forget, is that I've spoken to some people who say, okay, I want to start something in this space, or
Yeah.
I don't have my business plan yet. I'm like, most times you generally have an idea and you just wing it and you start building it from there, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you'd end up doing stuff which you didn't think you would have to do. So we wanted to do digital content, but 2009 digital content wasn't what everyone's focusing. So we did a lot of TV work. Like we made like promos for Disney's DVDs which they were selling. I remember it was a Princess and the Frog we've done. We've done show reels for actors who I will not name, who were trying to go to Hollywood and who ended up in Hollywood. I will just leave it at that. And stuff like that. That's a very small set. So you can
Yeah,
consider
now you can say actor for both female and male genders.
Yeah,
So it's a nice, nice one.
Yeah. So we've done all of that, right? Like we've made random videos for like mobile operators when 3G
Right.
came out, because 3G video was supposed to be a thing. I don't even know where those videos ended up. Like, but we would do all those to make sure bread and the business sustains. And keep pitching digital, right? And slowly you build that up is what I mean. Many times I tell people, don't say I'm not doing the kind of stuff I want to do. The kind of stuff you want to do will end up being 10%, especially in service industries, and then you slowly scale that up. Even now, I would say like we're 80% there. We're not 100% there yet in terms of what all we want to do.
By the way, the Varun duo is really rocking this, because I'm getting so many questions. Gaurav Vyas has asked me a question. So many people have asked questions. So I'm now getting a little overwhelmed here, like you probably would have felt when you started at the whole thing. But okay, here's this question. Very interesting thought came to my mind when you guys were talking about, because you've literally, you've cleaned the floors and stuff like that, which we all hear, and it's great, it's wonderful. But then you've scaled up, and then now you've either been acquired or there are investors and stuff like that. So you're managing different dynamics now. How so two questions. One is, how important is it to actually scale up as a person as you scale up as a company? Okay, and maybe you can answer that question first, and
Sure.
then I'll come to the next one. So maybe Varun A will go first.
Yeah.
Oh, I think, I mean, I don't think the answer can be no, right, to this.
Yeah, but how did
The
you?
answer is yes, right?
What are the changes you've
And
seen?
it's very important, right?
Hmm.
I think the way, so for example, what you rightly said, right? We started from ground zero after 10 years of, managerial experience, leading teams. At one point of time was leading like a team of 30 people and all of that. And we were like zero people, right?
Sure.
Just leading each other is what we were doing, right?
Correct.
And from there on, when
Hmm.
you initially start sort of, and especially with a middle class DNA, we were very frugal in nature. At towards early on, तो मतलब हम लोग we used to hire for yesterday, right? कि अभी मतलब जितना काम हो सकता है खुद कर लो, right?
Yeah.
और जब भी मतलब पानी सिर के ऊपर से निकल जाए तभी you start looking for someone कि यार कोई ये कर दे, right? क्योंकि अभी इससे business is getting hampered, right? So from that mindset, moving to a hire for tomorrow mindset, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're larger, you actually need to start thinking like that, right?
Yeah.
And even from, I think, if I was to go back and tell my younger self what I would do something early on, right? I think I should have brought that mindset even earlier in my journey. It took me almost about 1.5 years into this journey to bring that mindset
Right.
into me, and that too was sort of, we had great partners and board members who helped me do that. I think so. One big change that you have to sort of, bring in yourself is largely when most of the people start, it is very small teams or it is just you. Two, when you start scaling, you have to think of how you're going to build teams and get them to sort of do this, right? Parallelly, what you have to sort of also work on is how your role is changing, right? And
Right.
how you cannot be now. You effectively know the entire business, right? So, like D was saying, finance, NPD, everything, right? So, but you cannot be getting into other people's shoes. They have to sort of, get
Yeah.
stuff done, right? So you have to redefine your role, right? At every stage, you have to redefine your role, right? कि अब मैं क्या करूँगा, and
Yeah.
how will I do that without leaving the thread of culture, without letting the founder's mentality of the organization change, right? Because you can't be large enough, right? If you just keep that startup culture and that founder mentality into the company, that's the only way you will become really large, right?
Yeah.
These are all midpoints. So keeping that mentality alive is critical, but with parallelly you have to sort of redefine your own role, right? So that's the second way that need to continuously grow up, right? I think those two are the big ones for me. I'll let D add further to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, it was interesting, right? I think one of the things we decided almost 3 to 4 years ago was that, and it almost came naturally, is that the only way we would grow is that we keep building people who can take our jobs, and that's literally been our focus because. We've always been, I mean, me and Rohit and even Pooja, right? All three of us have that mindset of really saying, okay, we need to have some freshness in what we're doing. And we can only do that if we keep taking on different things and doing that. And we can only do that if we start handing it down. So if I look about 3 years ago, our next in line was about 6 to 8 people. Now, if I look at our next in line, that's close to about 20-25 people, right? And we spread that out. We build a large enough second and almost second and third rung in that sense, who handle different parts of the business in terms of creative, business, design, everything else. And that's really helped all of us, so say, okay, man, now I've taken off 50% of my plate, right? Then what am I adding in there? So every year we add more things in there.
Yes.
And that's literally, and while some focuses stay, like my focus has always been on our production content side of the business. But my thing every year is, okay, I have someone who's taking care of X here. What more can I bring in to the table, right? So
that's a very interesting thing. Yeah. So when can I shed my own skin? Essentially.
Also, then it gives the company a long-term view, right? So while we'll make sure that the essence of what we want the company to be stays in terms of what we wanted it to be in the beginning. Even if tomorrow, let's say hypothetically, if any of us decides to leave in 2-3 years, if it's large enough, we've built people who can take over our roles and stuff like that, the company should still run and still scale the same way it does.
What
and
is
so a
what
focus
is
of that.
really fascinating is that because you guys have had such different journeys, A has purpose deeply driven into the whole thing. You started off with a probably an absence of purpose, but some kida somewhere, which okay
It was a
now.
Kita, that is what it
Kida,
was.
correct. And the second thing which I'm noticing is that obviously you have a different metaphor driven thing. D has a metaphor driven thing, and A has looked at it very logically in the sense, okay, I need to do this. So I don't, so I have to do this. Otherwise, it won't grow to the next stage and stuff like that. But my question to, okay, so the second question, what do you think about organic versus inorganic growth? In your perspectives, what have you experienced? Because you clearly have grown, you've infused money. Maybe some people say no, always be, do what you're doing, don't get anybody else to back you. What are your thoughts on it? I mean, I know that it's a sensitive area, but I don't want to know how you think about your financial backers. I want you to know how the thinking is.
I
Sure.
feel that both of us will have the same answer to this one, but I'm going to
Oh,
let you go first.
no, why don't
We might just have different ones, man. Right?
yeah.
No. So honestly, Siddharth, I believe in India specifically,
Yeah.
I think we're very linear in our thinking,
Hmm.
and non-linear thinking is less so in the
Yeah.
country. It needs to be developed, honestly.
Correct.
And inorganic, similarly, is a non-linear thinking, right?
Hmm.
I believe. At different points of time. So, for example, inorganic in our case could be instead of building a brand, acquiring a brand, right?
Yeah.
And actually then scaling it up to another level.
Hmm.
And that's a non-linear way of sort of
Correct.
building. Right?
Correct.
Finally, we intend to be a house of brands. Right?
Yeah.
Now, in that scenario, there are rarely that thinking itself rarely exists here. While if you look at some of markets like US, right,
Yeah.
inorganic and non-linear thinking is very, very common, right?
Yeah.
Strategic tie-ups or acquisitions are
Yeah.
way more, relevant there, and that is
Yeah.
why even the capital ecosystem and the venture ecosystem has developed very efficiently, right?
Yeah.
So honestly, horses for courses, right? Depending upon the stage that you are at, right? Depending upon what you are looking at to achieve and in what period do you want to achieve that, right? You as an entrepreneur should be open to both things, right? So the worst thing that you can do is close your mind to anything, right? I mean, that's the worst.
How the hell do you make that decision then? In the
What
sense, because you're open
Yeah.
almost till the last, so up, you're playing like absolutely late. You're playing very late, right? Because there's swing. So you're playing. How do you make that call whether to leave that ball or to play that ball in a late way? How do you do that?
I think some part data, some part gut, yeah. Right?
Hmm.
And finally, you can't really say कि यार मैं हर बार ठीक ही decision लूंगा. Right? You will mess up, a lot of times. Shit will also happen a lot of times. Right?
Yeah.
That's part of this
Yeah.
journey. Right? And then you'll connect the dots later on कि यार मतलब ये ठीक था, ये गलत था. Right?
Correct.
But during that time, it is some part data which brings you to that decision. Right?
Yeah.
And then your heart sort of says one way or the another, and you just go there. And
Right.
we're still not in the AI mode where someone else can sort of take these decisions for us. So
Yeah.
we gotta live with regrets, man, on some of these decisions. Right?
Many,
But
yeah.
that is a fascinating part of this
Yeah.
journey.
No, thanks. That's a pretty decent answer. It's a complicated question. Now I'll ask him if it's the same complicated answer or is it different complicated.
I have very similar thought process, to be honest, on this one, which is why I said what I said
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
But I think so. There was this thing which I remember that. So Ronnie Scovel is someone which I've always looked at as a great
Yeah.
benchmark, right, in terms of just like how he looks at things.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember there was an interview of his, and me and Rohit keep talking about this. Is one of those things we quote very often. Is the fact that he said that only in India do you look at someone selling or bringing in a certain, letting go of certain level of ownership as a possible bad thing, right? If you see globally, getting in investment or scaling it up or bringing in more and more is actually considered to be a great thing, right? Yahan par, like, I remember like when we had done it, there were a few people who actually said bech diya, and we're like, no, like we this is the way to scale it up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's about that balance of, like you said, that gut and data. So for us, okay, if we stick to being entirely independent as an agency, how long would it take us to scale to where we need to go? versus getting acquired. And then, so we automatically now have a network globally we can tap into. We work on projects not just in India, but across the board. And we've been able to do that because when we have a requirement, we turn to someone from within the entire network, right?
Yeah.
And we say, okay. Yeah. And sometimes they turn to us here. And so that's helped us scale a lot faster.
Yeah.
And the idea was don't lose so the thing is that the mistake you can make is don't lose the nimbleness you would have, the agility you would have.
Okay.
But still try and take advantage. It's a balancing game. Sometimes you'll go this way, sometimes you'll go that way.
When does the answer come in? Does it come in the middle of the night or something? Or what happens?
So in our case, because of how the agency space works, there are honestly only two options, right? One is the fact that you continue running it yourself and you scale it there, or you find the right partner to scale up with. So we've actually, so I remember that almost like 5 years ago was the first time we got approached. We didn't even know that's an option. First time we heard of that. We said, okay, fair enough. We're not ready yet, right? Then again, every year somebody kept coming back, and then eventually some of those conversations became a lot more interesting because we were looking at specific gaps we had. Like, for instance, we've been primarily a creative agency who had production capabilities.
Correct.
But stuff like media, stuff like a deeper understanding of data, while you can get that yourself, being a part of a larger network gives us access to so much more on that space, right? I mean, we're able to tap into so many more insights, so much more data, and have great media partners to work with.
Did it depend on people also you met? So hey,
100%. Vibe is very important. Like we've had multiple meetings with networks and agencies, and it might have been a great deal, but we're like, no, it didn't vibe. So and that's important because you have to work with those people for a long time. If vibe nahi chala, to nothing else matters, right? That's the most important thing. Because you have to deal with them for a long time to come. So it's a mixture of all these things, and like he said, it's never going to be the right decision, right? It's always going to be, you'll always have issues with it later on, but you've done it now. Ho gaya, aage badho.
All right. So now I'm going to split questions because I've got too many questions, right? So one question for Varun, and Varun, don't worry, Varun A, don't worry. I'm keeping an eye out on the time for you. Here's the question for Varun A. Hi, I'm a part of the entrepreneurship cell in one of the new IIMs, and what I see are students are more interested in getting placements rather than looking at entrepreneurship. Okay. So do you recommend to start up after gaining some work experience, or if you have got a big idea, then just go for it? Because you clearly have done something. I'm just paraphrasing for this guy over here. You've clearly got a lot of work experience and then you jump ship. But do you think sometimes it just makes sense to start off when you're a baby or something?
I mean, examples of successes on both the sides are absolutely there, right? So, like I said, there is no right answer, right? And to a lot of such philosophical questions in life, there is no right answer, right? Probably 42 is the right answer, right? So in this case, it just sometimes you have to follow, your heart and your gut, right? So if you feel really strongly about something, right, and just feeling strongly about it is not enough, right? You have to do a lot of groundwork before you then finally make that decision, right? So doing some sort of research. I mean, have you put your mind to at least any idea, right? Or any, everything is largely about sales, right? Any idea can be pitched to a human, right? And that can be done over cold calls, over people with your classmates, with your teachers, right? Every time you will do that, right, you will learn something more, right? It'll enrich you, right? At the end of, let's say, those 40 to 50 conversations, and I'm saying minimum of those conversations, right, you will at least have enough sort of data in your mind, which is then needed to sort of take that gut call, right? ठीक लग रही है चीज, right? Abhi it is about my heart, right? And I feel like sort of putting all my and once you take that decision, right, do not look back and say कि यार अरे वो नौकरी कर लेता, right? या अभी भी जो है I can sort of leave this and start applying off campus and all of that, right? Don't, right? Commit, give yourself a timeline, right? बोलो कि ये 3 साल तक try करो.
Because I'm in the academic world, maybe I can also contribute to this thing. So the issue is essentially one of student debt. So the moment I've taken a loan, and I'm also, Indian society is very judgmental towards success and failure. And so what happens is that everything, my marriage, my this, my that, everything is connected to that job which is connected to a student debt. So you're jacked basically by the time you're in by the time you're in postgraduate college. I've probably mentored over 200 people now in digital projects that we do in lieu of a thesis at MICA, and we've seen that almost nobody starts off immediately off college. They wait for a couple of years and then do it, because they're getting that confidence out of that debt situation. I don't know, it's just the way things are, I suppose.
Like I said, we are a linear society here.
I think it's also the fact is you might not know enough about the market if you're still in college, right? So you need a little bit, like, I mean, and it's also like you get a reality check, right? When you're in college versus when you actually get out there, there's a bit of a reality check in the first year that you get in many ways.
Yeah.
But I'll still say कि मतलब कोई wrong या right नहीं है यार, right? तो आप मार सकते हो fight. Finally, entrepreneurs take risk, right? And yes, you are putting that debt also at risk, right? Yes, you are putting possibility that your marriage might be pushed by a couple of years, right? But boss तुम 23 साल के हो, मतलब क्या ये tension है? तो अभी ये the life is so long, right? And your career itself is going to be so long. Your working life, right, will end up being almost 40 odd years, right, after you pass out of college, right? And I'm not sort of putting that curse on people who want to sort of retire in 10 years, but I'm generally saying data wise, right? तो अगर वो इतना लंबा career span होना है, right, उसमें 2 साल इधर उधर, right, का कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, और वो 2 साल कौन से हो, वो 40 में हो, 30 में हो या 22 में हो, right, उससे भी कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, right? But do your
sorry, I don't know about you, but I'm getting a little bit of a stop and start at my end. But
we're fine.
You're fine. Okay, so here's my question to you guys. Okay, so Varun A had to unlearn a lot of things when he had to and you had to learn about corporate shit. Right? It's very
I like it, actually. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. So you're actually getting the job disguised as entrepreneurship in that sense, and Varun is actually moving in the other way. That's really interesting. Now, my question to you, Varun D, is if you had to kind of do two things. One is ask a question to Varun A. Okay, about something that you want to learn, because I know entrepreneurs are damn good learners. Yeah, I've seen that. They're just absorbing. So that, and the second is, what is one thing that you tell him?
So honestly, I'm a big fan of any single company that starts off as a D2C company, right? Direct to consumer brands are like one of my I believe that's really been one of the biggest game changer in the last 5 to 6 years across the board.
Correct.
I've always found it interesting because I'm guessing in your case the answer is simpler, but finding the right category and then figuring out if you need to stick to that or scale it up, how do you kind of take that decision, or how does that process work is actually what I've always found, especially for your brand, because I'm a consumer, right? I have a daughter who's almost 3, so we've been through the journey of trying to find brands. We've purchased multiple products from you guys, so which is why I also have a slightly vested interest in asking you this question because I've consumed the products.
Sure. So I think over time, I've sort of built a point of view around this, Varun. So initially when we started, I think there was largely that purpose and category was very clear because we were solving that problem in the baby care space, right? Over time, when I have understood the D2C model better financially, I can actually tell you the 3 specific ways, because now we are in probably 8 different subcategories, right? So we're in face care, we're in lip care, we're in body care, we're in hair care, and then we are looking at launching new brands, right? So it has to be a science now, right? So the 3 things that I believe we look at least before deciding if it's a great category from a D2C perspective, one is what is the average, what is the level of involvement in that category, right? Internet, naturally, the first thing that you do on internet is search, right? And the second thing that you do is consume content now, right? But it largely started with search and then moved on to other things, right? So anything that is prone to high level of involvement, which means that you research before taking a decision, is more tuned to a D2C segment, right? The second thing that we look at is what is the average ASP or average transaction price in that category. Right? Now, on the first thing, if something impulse for that matter, right? So if something like chocolates, right? Not a great category from a D2C perspective, right? Because you're not going to go and search too much on that category. You usually buy it, on an impulse level, right? So the second thing that works ASP for that category, right? Because in D2C there is a certain fixed cost that you're working with, which is the cost of logistics, right? Now that cost is not a percentage cost. That cost is a fixed cost, right? So you've got to have at least 300 plus selling price to run a unit economics viable business in D2C. Right? And the third thing that you look at is what is the frequency of consumption. Right? So is the person at least purchasing that category once a quarter or not? That makes, because in a lot of cases when you acquire a consumer, you acquire them to be first time negative, right? And the only way to actually sort of make money over time in this model, right, is if there is frequency of purchase in that category and you can bring them back, right? I think the fourth thing, if I was to add, is from a platform perspective, do you see having a land and expand strategy, which means, right, bring a consumer to your platform, right, and then get them to buy more categories or buy more units or buy into a subscription or things like that, right? So do you have a land and expand play in that D2C segment? So I think these four is what I would say I'd look at.
And Varun, what is the one thing that you'd like to tell him? Varun A to
I think you guys have a great brand. I mean, I'll be honest. I think as a brand, what you stand for, in my mind, because I was a first time parent when we started buying. I think that's something that can be really expanded wide and still maintain that essence. So I would say that's one thing which you should always that should be one focus area. I'm sure it already is. I don't have to obviously tell you that, but I think that's really interesting. I think your brand is very interesting because it's not a Johnson and Johnson, right? Because that feels like it's a lot of things. But with Mamaearth, I think it kind of very clearly in my head, I know what it stands for. So I think that's really. I don't think you should ever change that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that advice.
Okay, all right. So now the tables are turning. As I promised you are going to have googlies towards the end of it. By the way, I'm really sorry, guys. There have been so many questions over here. I'm not sorry. I'm sorry to you guys.
You should ask them to tweet to us or something.
I think so, because there's so many questions which I'm just going to read out by random. What kind of technologies aid in measuring marketing campaigns? How has it moved beyond just clicks and views? Do you recommend, this pandemic is a good option to start a startup, as there is a continuous, downfall in the economy?
Do a Twitter response.
Yeah, God. So many. Do you have any? Okay, but I'm going to ask that question later. Varun, I don't know whether you know it or not, but Varun D runs a really interesting podcast called Advertising is Dead. Now, my question to you is, do you think advertising is dead?
No, it can never be dead. Right? Form of advertising and form of media might change. Right? But as long as there are brands and as long as there are consumers, right? Advertising will always strive and thrive, right? So the form might change, right? So there is a possibility. I mean, you'll be surprised with some facts. Like, for example, L'Oreal last year did not spend any money on TV in China. Right?
Correct.
Everything was moved to digital, right? And the largest part of that spend was actually influencers, right? So there might be a time when all of us are just purely doing content marketing, right?
Correct.
And that is the biggest form of advertising. But advertising is all about telling your story, right, in a way that it lands on consumers' ears in the manner of positioning that you want it to land, right? So that can be achieved through multiple medias, but that is not going anywhere.
Okay, all right, good. Now, final question to you guys, right? Are you ready for it? Now,
go for it.
Yeah. All right. So, question is, obviously things have gone to shit. Okay. In each of not right now for COVID-19 or pandemic, right? But in your journey, right, at one point in time, things have gone to shit, right?
Yes.
I know this. Every entrepreneur knows this, right? Now, obviously, you've had the dark night of the soul and stuff like that. I just want to know in a short one, in a minute or two, right? Because I'm aware of Varun A's time constraint. What is your go-to funda? Your go-to funda to which helped you to get out of that?
Old monk.
Okay, no. I'm talking of something that you tell yourself.
Okay, so no, I just start zooming out, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Okay.
such a shit and beautiful flowers sinusoidal curve, friend,
Hmm.
that you almost see it on alternate day basis, right?
Yeah.
So you just need to zoom out a little, friend, and talk about यार 6 महीने कैसे रहे right?
Hmm.
या साल कैसा रहा है फर्दर
Hmm.
और वो भी छुट्टी है तो और zoom out मारो right and say कि शुरू क्यों किया था right why did
Okay.
this we start this right and
Yeah.
is this
Hmm.
shaking that pace right or not and at some level of zooming out you'll feel कि यार this is अच्छा टाइम भी आया बुरा टाइम भी आया दोनों कट गए and this shall too pass right so
I'm actually visualizing you downing one old monk and then zooming out a little, one another old monk zooming.
in my case with my wife right and
Wonderful.
talking about or you remember when this shit happened is this worse
Yeah.
than that right and you like also while you're zooming out right you're sometimes also zooming into the worst things that have happened right
Yeah.
and say कि यार अरे वो का ये लास्ट नहीं किया तो ये का क्या फर्क पड़ेगा so
Yeah.
things like that right I
Okay.
think that gets us through the night.
Okay. And quickly, Varun D, your answer?
So I think that things go to shit very often, right? And that's the whole point of this. But the thing is, you need what we've looked at is okay. Can it get worse? How and what
See,
do
again,
you
you're going the exact opposite way as Varun A does. He goes back, you go forward.
For example, right, so, there was a period of time when the largest part of our business was television production. We would do
Right.
TV shows, we do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
That kept going down and down because there were less and less margins we could make on that. So
Yeah.
at some point in time, we had to sit down and say, guys, right now this is not a sustainable business because we were bleeding because we were doing television properties.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, the only logical option was either to continue to bleed and try to do more of those, or to say let's not do those anymore. And we took the call of not doing that anymore because it was creating major fund issues for us. And so we did two things, right? One was we were honest with the people who worked specifically on those, tried to get as many of them different jobs, etc., and all that stuff. But we were honest with them. We even had a period of time where we didn't have enough funds, right? So there was a time, and it's a very weird thing.
Varun, I have a see. Those are the actions you took. But what got you out of that?
I mean, I'm not a person who likes to dwell on a problem as much. I might lose my shit at that point of time. Like he said, like it could be the fact that you need to have a drink. I also luckily had a co-founder, so we could have that conversation. But the immediate response has always been, okay, what's the solution, right? What is the way ahead? If you sit and dwell on, oh my God, things have really gone sideways at any point of time, it's only going to get worse in your mind. So no matter how big the crisis, at least my personal response has always been, okay, what's the solution? Like, how do you go ahead from this? Like, let's go ahead, which sometimes also comes across as like, one second, are you getting the gravity of what we have going on right now? But I'm like, what's the point of that? Like, let's figure out what way we need to go. And it's that first evening when these things happen, when you go out and have that drink and you have that conversation, you get it out of your system. And next day morning onwards, you fresh start and go out there and figure out a solution.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I know that Varun has a hard stop, so I'm just going to stop this conversation. It was like Varun calling Varun, and I was just the phone in the middle. Thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure. I think we rocked this session. What I also think is I just want to apologize in advance if I have kind of tread on any toes or anything of that sort. I have to make a general statement all the time with this webinar because, whatever. But what a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. I just wanted us to have this chilled time rather than, that typical webinar shit that we see a lot on LinkedIn.
No, I think this was so much better than I think the last 6 webinars that I've had.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All the best for everything, and do stay in touch with us. Yeah. And since we won't be talking after this, we normally have a call later on. Thank you so much. from
Thank you.
everybody at Kolosseum as well as me. Yeah. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank
Thank
you. Thanks for
Bye.
being